In this video, we're just going to go over as quickly as possible where things are within the Guitar Pro layout. So how to find things when you need them, how to kind of get a sense of what's placed where and why it might be placed there. So my goal with this is for you to be able to, when you're in the middle of a transcription, be able to classify what kind of problem you're dealing with, like how big or little of a problem is it, what type of problem it is, and then from there be able to think through where the solution might be in the menus. I hope that makes sense. So anyways, just overview, we've got our very top ribbon, which is like, you know, your software preferences. This is where you'd go if you had any issues with your earbuds connecting or something like that. MIDI controls, MIDI connection, interface type stuff, any presets you want to add. This is like you telling the software, like startup kind of controls. From there, you've got file controls, your usual file save, save as, export, import, file save related controls, your copy and paste related controls under the edit tab. Track tab is going to be, you know, referring back to the last video, adding, editing, deleting, moving around tracks, which would be these down here. Your bar tab is going to show you details pertaining to the measures of music themselves. Note tab is going to be your tab that affects the notes themselves once you do populate those into the document. Effects change the note. They change the properties of the notes. So once you have your notes in your score and you want to change how they're supposed to be performed or how they're supposed to sound, those types of controls, like, you know, hammer-ons, pull-up, pull-offs, dead notes, slap notes, vibrato, using a whammy bar, wah, golpe, flamenco type techniques, all that stuff is going to be under effects section. This is really helpful when you start adding like your intro, verse, chorus, bridge, outro. When you start adding those types of details to your track, the section controls help you navigate between sections more quickly. I strongly advocate the use of this. It saves you a lot of time when you get into a larger tab. And a lot of songs turn out to be like 10 plus pages, so you find yourself relying on those kind of details a lot. And especially if you batch edit and you like work on this verse and then copy paste some information into the other verses and change it around. So when you get into those types of batch editing techniques, that's really where section controls come in handy. Tools is not necessarily must-haves, but very, very nice to haves. In particular, check bar duration, bar arranger, complete and reduce bars with rest, and then the move swap voices menu. I really like this one. It speeds up my workflow considerably. Playback control type stuff, view controls. Then you have your top ribbon, your edition palette over here, your editing window, your global view on the very bottom, this very bottom ribbon down here, and then your inspector column on the right. So those are kind of your big sections that you need to think about. You have control of them up here in the top ribbon. So if you need to clean things up so that you can see what you're doing, you can toggle those back and forth. You can go back to the home menu if you need to check anything out, back to scores. You can change how to view things through this. You can, if you're on a trackpad or can scroll or whatever. I'm just pinching in, like I'm on my, I've got turmeric on my fingers, but that like zoom in, zoom out thing, that's all I'm doing right here. So pretty simple. If you need to like recenter things, just move around your directional buttons. Undo, redo, section playback controls. This is just a really handy little like reference menu. I didn't really use this much when I got started, but it's actually really, really helpful. And it'll tell you stuff like if your measure doesn't have enough notes in it or it's like an invalid duration, For example, this track is set to 4/4 time, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4. So mathematically, that's 4 beats to a measure, and then each beat is treated like a quarter note. So that's what we mean when we say 4/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2. So very, very simple. But when you're notating something, you need to have exactly 4 beats mathematically filled out. No more, no less. That includes rests and notes. So if you have too many notes or rests or not enough, this little thing right here will tell you. So if it's red, it means it's an invalid duration. If it's yellow, it means there's nothing in the bar. And if it's green, it means that it's exactly right. So that's what this is for. And you can click it one time and it'll tell you like how many notes you need to add, or like how many beats you need to add, excuse me. And, or, you know, that view, obviously, this will tell you based off of your tempo and how many measures you have, it'll tell you how far along you are in the song and how long the song is. So right now it's 8 measures long at 120 beats, 4/4, that's like 16 seconds. Tells you your rhythm feel, tells you your tempo. You have the option to activate or deactivate the metronome when you are in playback. Control the count in, and like these are practice tools, I would say. So this is your loop, and this controls the speed of your playback. And you have the option to set it super slow. You have the option to set it at 1 pace and then progressively get faster with each loop, which is really helpful for practice. So, but yeah, you have to have the loop on for those to work. If you just need to change the pitch for practice, like let's say the piece is in standard tuning, no capo, and you still want to think about it that way, but it's hard to reach certain chords and you need to capo up, but you want to hear it in the same pitch that you're playing, like practicing back with. This allows you to transpose without adjusting any of the details in the score. So you don't risk throwing anything off. So that's what that's for. This toggles your view if you've added an audio file. I will do a whole very, very detailed thing on this, probably like 3 or 4 different videos at least. So this is how you just toggle that view once you've added that in. Your virtual fretboard and your virtual keyboard, they correlate to each other, but they're also helpful if you don't have an instrument in front of you, or you just need to find a note and it'll place it. So I don't really use those much, but they're there if you need them. You've got a tuner, and you've also got a line in. I can't say I've ever used that. Okay, so that's the top ribbon. You can also have multiple different projects open at the same time. If you were just in between projects, or if you needed to copy paste from one into another, you have the option to do that with, I don't know, I've had easily like 10 or 11 tabs open at the same time. I mean, it can handle a lot. Okay, now onto the addition palette, which is this column right here on the left. And you'll notice as I go through this one in particular, that this is kind of laid out in outline format. Not absolutely, but pretty close to it. So, you know, we think about up here, we have our copy paste type controls. And you kind of have them over here in the sense that if you're working in multi-voice, you would toggle that on or off right over here. If you're isolating voicing 1, 2, 3, or 4, this is where you would go to switch between them. I advise staying out of multi-voice when you're adding your notes because it can get kind of messy. And this is design mode. I will go in depth with design mode later, but it allows you to kind of change the number of measures per line. You can also change this kind of stuff and change individual notes themselves once they're in there. If you are having issues getting other things in your tab to work, check and make sure design mode is off. It can throw off what controls are available to you. Because there's a lot of gesture-based controls with Guitar Pro. There's a lot of like, I don't want to call it hidden functionality within Guitar Pro, but there's certain little hover type controls that disappear if design mode is on, if that makes sense. So you've got that. You can add lyrics and have them correlate to a melody line for like a vocal track. You have the option to like add your chord diagram so that it populates at the top or something like that. Okay, so that's the very first tab of the Addition palette. Next up, as you see, we get a little bit more micro with each different subsection. So these are like basic copy-paste type controls, lyrics and chords, things that would appear at the top of the score. Now we have score-related information, like what key are we in? What clef are we in? What's our time signature? What's the rhythm feel? Do we have any codas or repeats in this? Those types of details are going to be up here. And then the next subsection down from that, you go a little bit more micro and you look at how do I actually add the notes in the track? How do I affect the duration of those? How do I affect the dynamics of those? How loud or soft they are? Next subsection, you're looking at expression details. So effects, you see some redundancy here. Accents, how the notes are played, not just how long are they and how loud are they. How are they played? So that's what we're looking at with these expression details. Then we've got theory related stuff. So your option to change your subdivisions so that you can visualize things in a more editorial type controls over how the score presents. So adding notes, changing the loudness, adding notes, changing the duration, changing the loudness, changing how it's played, changing how it's read, and then changing how the software interprets it. So you've got your tempo controls down here. You also have them right there. Sometimes it clicks, sometimes it doesn't. That's what I mean with the multi-voice thing. Certain details kind of disappear. And this bottom subsection is going to be track automations. So this is very much just an icing on the cake thing. Very, very micro, kind of off in the weeds if you haven't handled the other things. So that's your Addition palette. That's probably one of the most important areas that you're going to be working from within Guitar Pro. It helps to memorize the keystrokes and the shortcuts for most of these. So if you hover over them, you'll usually be able to see. So if I created a hammer-on right there, it shows up like that. And you'll see that there's that little hover that shows you in parentheses what the shortcut is. I strongly advise learn the shortcuts as you go because it will make your workflow so much faster. Guitar Pro in particular, if you learn the shortcuts, you can halfway type your way through a tab. There's a lot of other softwares you just have to hunt and peck and all that kind of stuff, and it's too tedious for my liking at least. I like that Guitar Pro, you can just learn it once and then it's just muscle memory. Okay, now we have Global View, which is this very bottom ribbon. It shows you which tracks you have, which ones are visible. It helps you toggle in between multiple tracks if you have them. So let's put a piano in right now and we can see the steel guitar and the piano. We can change the order of them. We can view one or the other. I mean, you even have the option to kind of mix and pan and EQ and add effects pedals and stuff like that to these. You could go crazy with all of these controls. It does kind of slow down the tab a little bit and it can introduce some popping. So don't get too crazy with that, I would say. But it's very functional and it's really great for creating a more vibrant sounding transcription. This little grid system over here, matrix, whatever it would be called, this is really helpful for navigating the score from a bird's eye perspective. So you'll notice these are all little gray boxes, and they correlate to the measure numbers above So these are just, these little gray boxes. They represent blank measures, and the little black square inside of that shows us where our cursor is in the score. So it shows us from a macro perspective kind of where we are, which track we're on, and this is where you see that color coding from the track kind of makes sense. So if I add some notes to this, you'll see that I'm starting to get some little red boxes in the global view at the bottom. And that lets me know that those measures are populated and some aren't. And then if I decide I wanted to add sections, like let's say a intro, and then let's do verse, but not include any alphabetical sort of indicators here. And you'll see that it shows up down here, but that this one shows up a little bit differently because it doesn't have that alphabetical right in front of it. So these are really helpful for kind of getting a sense of where you are in the tab, especially when you're dealing with 10 plus pages of music. And multi-track stuff. It really helps you stay on track with that. So yeah, that's your global view. And when you have an audio track introduced, it'll also show you like a little condensed version of the waveform down here too. And then on your inspector, you have your song information. This one's more simple, I would say. Your song information. And it just kind of looks like a Word document template kind of thing. So yeah, it shows most of this information. I'll go through in detail in another video how to get that looking a little bit more intentional. And then from here, the other tab in the inspector is your track tab. Your labels for your tracks, your color coding. Like when you add track up here, these kind of details, they're redundant down here as well. So right in this area, if you needed to change those at some point, they're right there. Your tuning is going to be right in here. I'll go in depth on that later, but what I will say is if you adjust the tuning, maybe try keeping the fingering. I don't want you to get ahead of yourself and mess anything up. Just general rule of thumb, keep the fingering if you change the tuning. I'll explain later. If you're not directly in concert pitch or not directly in standard notation for guitar, this is where you would change that kind of stuff. I will go very much in depth on that because it changes if you start adding these kind of capos, but not those kind of capos. It's a mess. That's for another video. And then down here you have controls that adjust how the virtual instrument interprets the track. So like how strummy it needs to sound or how finger-picked it needs to sound. Those are kind of like editorial details that you would control from this section down here. So yeah, that is that's your basic tour of Guitar Pro. Big takeaway points would be just think of things as a macro to micro. So this, being the macro side of things all the way to micro, macro to micro to like bells and whistles, macro to micro to bells and whistles, just basic navigation tool down here. And then again, macro to micro to bells and whistles. So yeah, just remember that. As much as you can manage, try and memorize some of these keyboard shortcuts as we go. It'll really save you time, I promise. All right, on to chapter 3.